1987, I began what I considered to be the dark years of my life as I look back. It was a period of great chaos for me. I had answered the call to ministry in 1983. I had served as the associate pastor at Hinton Avenue United Methodist Church in Charlottesville, graduated from the University of Virginia. I had taken, as a way of paying for my seminary, I had taken a 4-point charge, which in United Methodism means four churches that you serve every Sunday. I had taken a 4-point charge just outside, halfway between Athens, Georgia, and Anderson, South Carolina. You know, if I wanted to go to the grocery store or to see a movie, I had to drive 45 minutes in one direction or the other. I served there from 85 until 87 while I was going to school at Candler School of Theology at Emory University in Atlanta. But in 87, everything in my life came unglued, completely, just unglued. I left ministry. I moved back to Charlottesville. A brief period of time, I moved back home. I substitute taught. I moved back to Charlottesville. I worked for a doctor's billing agency. Even more of my life came unglued. I moved to Silver Spring, Maryland. Not that that is necessarily the equivalent of unglued, but I moved to Silver Spring, Maryland. I went to work for Blue Cross and Blue Shield of the National Capital Area. Now I think Care First is what it is now, but I worked in the Federal Customer Service Department talking to customers on the line, convincing them that I knew something about their insurance coverage. I did actually, and all that time though that and of course shortly after I decided to leave seminary and come back, I got this really ugly letter from Bishop Blackburn, my bishop, telling me that I owed the conference, that I couldn't leave ministry, that was not my choice, it wasn't up to me, it was up to someone else, and they had invested so much, how dare I leave ministry? So I had this wonderful taste in my mouth of leaving the calling to which I felt, and you know, I sold vacuum cleaners door to door. I did a little bit of everything. Waited tables, maybe made the best money I've ever made in my life waiting tables. You know, 5 hours a night, you know, I'd walk away with all this undeclared cash in my pocket, which I declared some of. I won't tell you how much I declared. In any case, we're not talking about my taxes. But my life, you know, was really a mess. And so 1988 passes, 1989, I'm doing this work, and as my life was so unglued, I had entered into pastoral counseling, and you know, first it was weekly. I felt like maybe it should be nightly, but it was weekly, and then my counselor said, you're getting better, we can do this a couple of times a month, and then we can do it once a month, and then you can check in every 3 months. I did that for 10 years, etc. But I was starting to feel that maybe I had been hasty in leaving ministry. But you know, according to my bishop from Virginia, I had burned all my bridges. You know, I had failed them. And so my counselor said, what are you feeling? And I said, I'm feeling like I'm supposed to go back into ministry, but you know, I've got this letter from my bishop that says, you suck. You know, and so, you know, essentially, that's a translation, maybe a very loose one, but it felt that way. And so it was chaotic. It was chaotic, and I was wrestling with God. Now, the one thing that didn't end during that period of uncertainty is I reached on my shelf, because by that time I had way too many books already. I still have way, way, way too many books now, but I pulled out my book of common prayer, and every morning I prayed morning prayer, and that was what I had. That was my anchor. That's what I had. I was very poor. I lived off peanut butter sandwiches, peanut butter for breakfast, peanut butter for lunch. There was more than once I scraped the mold off of bread so I could eat it anyway, and it was an adventure. It was an adventure in absolute chaos, and I was wrestling with God about this, and God's like saying, I'm hearing God say, I think I got something I need you to do. And I'm like, God, I already burned that bridge. I've already gotten the note from the bishop, the guy who works for you. And, but I said, fine, I'll consider it. So I started the process again, only this time in the Baltimore-Washington Conference, because I was across the river anyway, and I didn't think the Virginia Annual Conference wanted me anymore. So I started the process again, and I applied to and went off to seminary at Wesley. But I was wrestling the entire time with this God, trying to figure out what to do. And I came away from that experience a different man. In a way I succeeded, and in a way I came away with kind of a limp. I felt like I was wounded and not quite fully there. And yet, I think it's the woundedness I bring to my work that makes me a better pastor. The pain that I've experienced and struggled with in my life makes it possible for me to hear other people. Anybody who saw my life up until 1987 from the outside thought it was beautiful and pristine, but I had sown chaos before, and I sow chaos wherever I go, apparently. My business card says that I'm the chief chaos manager here, in addition to the senior pastor. And that's pretty accurate. That's actually pretty accurate. Well, I want to read you the story of someone who, in the midst of his life, found himself right caught in between. We're looking today at Genesis chapter 32, verses 22 through 32. And I'm reading from the Common English Bible, but you can read from any version that you want if you wish. I don't know if you'd rather have the background information before I read the text or after, but I've decided to give it to you before. Jacob has messed up his life. Jacob is a guy who stole his brother's blessing, and then rather than pay the consequences of stealing his brother's blessing, he impersonated his brother. His older brother Esau was supposed to get his father Isaac's blessing, and so Esau was hairy, and so Jacob puts on a fake fur hairiness on his arm because his father's blind, so he can't tell that, can't really see. So he puts his arm out, and it feels like that it's Esau, but it's Jacob. And he steals his father's blessing, which belonged to Esau, and then he doesn't face up to it. He runs away, and he runs away to his uncle Laban, who he finds out is also a trickster. His name, Jacob, really means trickster. It means heel. It means usurper. It means supplanter, someone who steals someone else's place. That's what his name means, and he lived into his name. So he runs off to his father-in-law, who then becomes the bigger trickster and tricks him into marrying first one daughter and then another daughter, and then keeping his sheep and promising it'll all work out and you can go, and he doesn't go. So Jacob figures out a way, trickster that he is, to trick his father-in-law, and then he runs away. And now he's caught between a rock and a hard place, because the only place to go back to is Esau. And the only place he can't turn around and run, because his father-in-law is chasing after him, because he's run away with all of, his slaves and wives and all of his sheep. He's got everything. So Laban's coming after him. The man is just in a mess. So he decides he's going to cut a deal. Maybe Esau won't kill him if he sends all of his stuff ahead, if he gives him all of his stuff. Maybe Esau let him at least come back and be safe. And that's where we meet Jacob in today's story. Jacob got up during the night, took his 2 wives and his 2 wives' servants and his 11 sons, and crossed the Jabbok River's shallow water. That's dangerous business in the middle of the night, by the way. Don't be crossing rivers in the middle of the night, but he did. He took them and everything that belonged to him, and he helped them cross the river. But Jacob stayed apart by himself, and a man wrestled with him until dawn broke. When the man saw that he couldn't defeat Jacob, he grabbed Jacob's thigh and tore a muscle in Jacob's thigh as he wrestled with him. The man said, "Let me go because the dawn is breaking." Jacob said, "I won't let you go until you bless me." He said to Jacob, "What's your name?" And Jacob said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name won't be Jacob any longer, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and won." Jacob also asked and said, "So tell me your name." But he said, "Why do you ask my name?" And he blessed Jacob there. Jacob named the place Peniel, because I have seen God face to face, and my life has been saved. The sun rose as Jacob passed Peniel, limping because of his thigh. Therefore, Israelites don't eat the tendon attached to the thigh muscle to this day, because he grabbed Jacob's thigh muscle at the tendon. That's just kind of like a little throwaway line at the end of it. It's always funny when you read some of these biblical stories. It's like, that's why we don't eat tendons, because somebody ripped Jacob's tendon. We just don't go there. But it's a fantastically intriguing story, because here is a guy who's reaping the whirlwind that he created for himself. He alienates everybody in his life, all the anchor places that he could have gone. And now he's stuck by himself in the middle of the night wrestling. Have you ever found yourself kind of in the middle of some kind of crazy thing in your life, either by your own making or by somebody you're convinced somebody else is making? We live in a country where we are quick to blame everybody else for problems of our own making. I don't know why. It's got to be somebody else's fault. Let's sue them. It's the litigiousness and craziness of our country. But in any case, the truth is, Jacob knows who has made this mistake. And now all those hens have come to roost. And Jacob is wrestling. Now, is it a spiritual wrestle? Absolutely. Is it a physical wrestle? It sounds like it. He tore his thigh muscle. It's a wrestle. And he wrestles all night long. But he's unwilling to lose. He doesn't win, but he doesn't lose either. And he finally figures out, it starts off by saying he's wrestling with a man. That's really the word. I wanted to look it up, so I pulled out the Hebrew scripture and looked it up, and it says he's wrestling with a man. But then the language changes, because this being wants to get away before the light. And we have the sense that being is, Hosea says it's an angel, but it could be God. It's either God or an angel that Jacob has been wrestling with. The hens have come to roost, and he's got to figure out what to do. Can't go back, doesn't know if he can go forward, stuck right where he is. And that's chaos, friends. That is chaos. Don't know if you can go forward, definitely can't go back, but not sure where you're going at all. And that's where Jacob finds himself wrestling all night long. But here's what Jacob doesn't do, and this is the key to his story. He doesn't give up. The man does not give up. The dude says, "Give up." And Jacob says, not until you bless me. I got to get something out of this. Trickster, still the trickster. Jacob the trickster. My name, James, means trickster. It's the English version of Jacob. I just love that. Sorry, James. I saw your wife gave you a little kick there. But the trickster. And so he's a trickster, but the blessing is he becomes somebody else out of the wrestling. He becomes someone who wrestled with God and with humans and came out on the other side. He held on until the morning light. And I think that's what we need to learn from Jacob, because I think we've already figured out, and the Chaos series keeps going on. I didn't realize how long I planned the Chaos series. I just kept finding stories, so it goes on until the 22nd of October. So if you haven't figured out how to do Chaos yet, I'm going to keep telling you for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Everybody gives us I think everybody deals with chaos, so it's easy. Or it's hard. But if you're dealing with chaos and it's an eventuality that's coming into your life, whether it's thrown into because a relationship falls apart, or because a job gets lost, or because you end up getting something you didn't plan on getting, or not getting something you did plan on getting, something comes your way that just messes everything up for you. And in those moments, the only thing you can do, and I didn't even know I was doing it in that late 80s story I told you, but Jacob did it, and that is hold on tight. Once you realize this is God, you don't let go. You may let go of everything else that's coming apart in your life. You've got to let go of some of those things. But in the end, it's between you and God, and you've got to hold on tight and not let go. And that's what Jacob did. That's why Jacob became someone else, the one who strove with God and human beings, who struggled, and neither won nor lost. It says he prevailed, but he didn't really completely prevail. He walked with a limp for the rest of his life. I will carry the wound of my stupidity of youth for the rest of my life. I will carry that wound. And I can do something with it. I can whine about it for the rest of my life. Or God can use that limp to help other people who are limping along too. I have to choose whether I'm going to engage that. Whether I'm going to say, God, I'm going to hold on. I'm holding on. I would like you to make me something other than a trickster, usurper, supplanter guy, please. But only you can do that. The transformation that happens for Jacob is his wrestling with God and not being willing to let go. And sometimes you got to wrestle with God. Sometimes you have just got to wrestle and not let go. I think sometimes what I see happening in our world today is we try something, and even if we're convinced it's the thing we're supposed to do, we just let go of it really easily because, we'd rather fail and just move on. We'd try something else. Now, sometimes it's time to let go, and you have to figure out when that moment is. Sometimes it is, the sun is coming up, and you got to let go. But there's a time you've got to hold on. And sometimes we let go too easily of the struggle. What's at the bottom of what you're struggling with? The only way I can imagine that Jacob emerged on the other side, it wasn't just a name change. You can't just change your name and be somebody else. It was a heart-rending change. It was a rip in his thigh change. It was a walk away with a limp for the rest of your life kind of change. It's not easy kind of change. Maybe Jacob came face to face with God, and the term of that face to face was, I have really been a trickster my whole life. I've been less than I could have been. You gave me these gifts, and instead of using them for good, I used them for evil. Maybe not evil, but certainly for tricksterishness, whatever that turns out to be. I know what I've been. Can I be something else? And the answer that Jacob shows us is if we tenaciously hold on to God in the midst of that wrestling, there is another side. There is another place we can emerge, transformed, made new. This isn't the only kind of story like this. Now, I don't want to jump ahead to the whole Jesus story because that's our last week of October the 22nd. But the bottom line is, in order for there to be a resurrection, Bobby McLean always told me in my black preaching class, in order for there to be an Easter, there had to be a Good Friday. In order for there to be a resurrection, there has to be a crucifixion. There has to be a death. And there are things in our lives that have to change for us to emerge on the other side. And that's where we wrestle with God. God, I want to keep this. I don't think you need it. I want to keep this. I got up this morning wrestling with God, and I wasn't happy with the wrestle. I said, I would like to know what I'm talking about this morning. Exactly. I have notes. I've got pages. I wrote more in my journal this week than I've written in months. And I have nothing to say. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And so I'm sitting on my chair. I'm praying really hard on my couch over there. And it's not mine. It's really yours, but I sit there. And, I'm struggling. I'm praying. I'm wondering. I'm listening to the music this morning. It's inspiring me. It's making me cry, which is never good for getting your mind together. It's all coming into pieces. And then Megan walks over to me and says, James, sometimes this is the way God works. You don't want to do it God's way, and God just kind of opens the door. So I'm just hoping that God is opening the door now and I'm not just rambling in circles. Because, I'm pretty good at that too. I can chase as many squirrels as there are. And sometimes more than I just imagine while I'm chasing them. But in the end, the struggle was worth it. I didn't know what story I was going to lead with today. And then I realized I went through that dark night of my soul in the late 80s and emerged on the other side. And I only emerged on the other side because I refused to let go of God. Now I emerged with a limp and broken and not quite the man I imagined I would be. And no, I'm not a bishop or the president or any of those kinds of things that I imagined was God's plan for me when I was young and arrogant and foolish. But I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And you know what that happens? That happens when you don't let go of God, when you tenaciously hold on, when you're willing to wrestle, when you're willing to recognize that God is God and I'm James. I'd like to be Israel, but I get to be James. I get to be the James God wanted me to be all along because God planted that in me to begin with. And it's the wrestling that tears off the facade that we use to hide behind and lets us be who God wanted us to be all along. That's what Jacob found out. Now, lest you think that this is an unhappy ending, Jacob crosses over the river prepared to have to face the consequences of seeing his brother Esau. Esau embraces him and welcomes him. All because Jacob was willing to wrestle through the night. Dark nights of the soul and chaos is coming. It may come in little ways, it may come in big ways, but it's coming. And you have to be willing to hold on and wrestle it through. Wrestle it through. Don't give up. Never give up. Never surrender until the right time, and then surrender. Jacob names the place Peniel, and Peniel just means face of God in Hebrew. For I have seen the face of God and been saved. I can say to you this morning, I have seen the face of God and I have been saved. I just didn't get a new name. So, here's what you have to do. Isn't it always nice when the preacher just sums it all up and says, this is what you got to do because I've got the prescription for you, baby. You came here this morning for that reason or watched online for a reason. I need you to hang on. There are going to be moments when your faith is stretched thin, really thin. You look around, you read your Facebook feed, I don't know, whatever, and you think, is there anything good left in this world sometimes? We fight over the pickiest little things sometimes. And yet God is all around us. I see it in your faces on Sunday mornings. I see it in the flowers outside. The fall flowers, the spring flowers. I see it in the birds. I hear it in the birds singing. I hear it in the conversations I have, in the hugs of old friends that I haven't seen in a long time. God is there. Don't give up. Don't surrender. Hold on. Hold on. Because it may be the holding on that is the blessing itself.